Well, welcome back, everyone. I'm sorry about that interruption, but I'm told that the fault's been cured and we're ready to continue. So could you ask Mr. Stokes to come back in, please? Okay. Right, Mr. Stokes, apologies for the delay, but we are now ready to continue and I hope it won't happen again.
Sir.
All right? When you're ready, Mr. Kinnear.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Stokes, I think before the interruption, we were about to turn to a concern expressed by Gary Mitchell, who's the Contracts Manager, Assets and Regeneration in February 2013. And if I could ask to turn up an email correspondence, TMO 1002165/2. And we see in the bottom half of, the top half of that page, you see in the opening, this is an email addressed from Gary Mitchell to Peter Madison. Opening line says this: we have RGE coming in to see us on Monday with a full 2 years maintenance service reports, and we'll interrogate the information they provide. The problem we have is we've been given records that indicate RGE are maintaining their planned programme, but Don and I have questioned the validity of the information produced. Did anyone report to you these concerns regarding the validity of the information produced by RGE?
No.
Again, is that something you'd have expected the TMO to have provided to you? That information about the concerns?
I can't answer that question because I wouldn't know what they would want to provide me with, but I would like to think that they would have provided me with some information if they thought there was a problem.
Now, can we turn forward in time now to March 2014? And just to give you some idea of the context, the LFB visited the tower on the 12th of March 2014, and thereafter there was some email correspondence and discussion of the various points that had been raised by Matthew Ramsey of the LFB during the course of that visit. And can I first ask you to look at an email of the 13th of March, which contains some notes of the discussions on that day. That can be found at TMO 1005515/4.
So, can I just make an observation on that email, please? It says that they didn't realise that there were any failings until they were highlighted to us in the FRAs.
Yes, thank you. If we could now turn to the email correspondence of March 2014 and TMO, there we go, 1005515/4. And we see the email chain starts at the bottom of that page with an email from Claire Williams sent at 15:43, sent to Janice Ray, but also copied to yourself and Bruce Soons of Studio E. If we could turn over the page to page 5 and point 2, where Claire Williams' email deals with the AOV, and she states this, and I quote, Matthew, that's Matthew Ramsey, the LFB, was very unhappy about the existing state of the smoke vent suite lobby. Of those looked at, about 30% were not in the right position. I've been chasing RGE for 2 months now on their servicing records and had nothing back. Janice, do you want to chase Simon Coleman or Dill on this, as I am obviously getting nowhere? Matthew said about issuing us with a notice to confirm fully functional in 6 weeks, but maybe I can deal with Daniel on this, assuming we do have some servicing records. Now, if I can ask you now to turn to the bottom of page 2 of this email chain, and we see there at the very bottom the response from Mr. Soons. And if we can turn over the page to page 3, and it's roughly halfway down that page, and below the bullet point that refers to a bike chained to a dry riser. So if we go further down that email, there we go, and you'll see under the heading Visit to Lobby Floor 5, you look down that list of dash points, you'll see bike found chained to dry riser. The point immediately below that says this, and I quote, vents open and closed, existing situation not working. And then it says below that, Matthew Ramsey, very unhappy with fact dampers do not appear to be functional. Risk of 4-week enforcement notice. A demonstration would be required. This is urgent. Now, did you understand from this email correspondence into which you were copied that the AOV was not functional?
No, because first of all, the RGE had a record that it was serviced and functional apart from, I think, one item, looking at the date. And it says, very unhappy with fact dampers do not appear to be functional. Vents open and close. But the system, my understanding, it's a mechanical system. The system is also a ventilation system for the lift lobby areas. So vents would be open or closed until the activation of the fire alarm system, which would open the vents only on the fire floor where it activated and closed all the rest. They could be in their open and closed position. It was just a shaft up and down the building.
Given that the LFB has identified that the dampers do not appear to be functional and there's a risk of enforcement action being taken, at the very least, did that give rise to a concern in your mind about the functionality of the AOV?
No, because if the fire service were going to ask for that, that's within their remit. They can ask for that, and they would then be justified in asking, and also the requirements that would come back to satisfy themselves that it was working correctly.
Now, if we can turn to a letter which you wrote on the 18th of March 2014, prompted by this correspondence, and that can be found at TMO 1000572. There we go, in the dated the 18th of March, opening line, thank you for asking me to comment on the questions raised by the LFB officers during their visit to the above buildings, which included Grenfell, on 12th of March. Now, if I could ask us to go to the top of the second page of this letter, you say this, and I quote, "The emergency smoke control extract panel was showing healthy when looked at yesterday with the switch in the auto position. The flat lift lobby extraction system is activated by the automatic fire detection device on each of the flat lift lobby area ceilings. The extraction system works by the vents on one side of the flat lift lobby area, expelling the smoke with inflow air coming in through the vents on the other side of the lobby area." And then if we look at the very end of this page and the final sentence, in which you say this, "I am assuming that as RGE have serviced the smoke extraction system of Grenfell Tower, that all parts of the system were checked." Now, first of all, did you yourself inspect any element of the AOV system before writing this letter?
Only as it's said there, I would have taken the photographs that it was healthy and showing green.
So you looked at the panel?
Yes.
Okay. So you didn't inspect the inlet dampers?
You would have to take the inlet dampers. Are we talking about the louvers?
Well, did you inspect the inlet dampers? Any element of
The
element of the system?
So the terminology, do you mean louvered vents or the dampeners which could be internally within the shafts, which would be fire dampeners, or the louvered vents that cover each opening on each floor lift lobby area?
Did you inspect any of those aspects of the system which you've just identified?
The ones that were visually available, yes.
Now, in your letter, you didn't refer there to the concerns that Claire Williams or Bruce Soons had raised in their email correspondence the 13th of March. Can you help us as to why you didn't refer expressly to those concerns?
Which concerns were they, sir?
The ones in the email correspondence I've just taken you to, Mr. Stokes.
So I can't remember what they were, sorry.
Do you want to go back to them?
Please, sir.
Perhaps we should do that.
Yes. Can we go back to TMO 1000515/4? And there we go. Claire Williams' email, 12th of March. You're copied in.
Yes, sir.
Turn over the page to page 5. Point 2. the extract I quoted to you. If we go to page 2 in this chain, you'll see there at the bottom a response from Bruce Soons to Claire Williams, copying you in. Do you have that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's turn over the page to page 3, sent on the 13th of March. If we can scroll down this email, remember I identified the heading, visit to lobby floor 5,
Sir.
and then look down at the dash points. Do you see something which says vents open and closed, existing situation not working? Below that, Matthew Ramsey very unhappy with fact dampers do not appear to be functional. Risk of 4-week enforcement notice. A demonstration would be required. This is urgent. Now, my question was a simple one, was why didn't you refer to those concerns and address the substance of those concerns in your letter of the 18th of March 2014?
I think I did answer those questions, sir.
Can I now ask you to go back to your letter of the 18th of March, was at TMO 0005572, and go to page 2, and if we could go to the top of this page, and you'll see there in the second paragraph you said this: the smoke extraction system is on a planned preventative maintenance program with RGE. This contractor last serviced the system according to their on-site logbook on the 15th, 13th, sick. Please see Appendix A below. The previous loose page in the logbook was full, and the service before this one was in September 2013. So I'm assuming that the 15th month is a mistake, and the engineer meant the 12th month. As can be seen, the engineer checked all of the items in the quarterly checklist, and the only fault recorded was 19th floor relay. As the next quarterly service is imminently due on this smoke extraction system, I would recommend the contractor is asked to service the system, and any findings, etc., made are actioned. Now, in your FRAs, you'd specified that there should be monthly testing of the AOV, but here you've noticed that they are undertaking quarterly servicing. Why did you not say in this advice letter that the AOV should be tested monthly?
So the monthly could be an occupier's check. Quarterly is a service contractor's check, which is slightly different.
And that's the reason why you didn't you didn't correct them in your letter of advice of the 18th of March.
Sure.
Okay. Now, can I turn to a separate question, which is that of interim measures and the meeting that was held on the 16th of September 2014. Now, in paragraph 107 of your first witness statement, and we can find that at CST quadruple 03063/37. And if we could just amplify paragraph 107. You say in the opening sentence, and I quote, prior to receipt of this deficiency notice on 18th of August 2014, I was asked by Ms. Ray to undertake the 2014 FRA. Close quotes. Now, you can take it from me that your 2014 FRA was carried out on the 17th of October 2014. Now, was the deficiency notice there you were referring to the one which had been served on the 24th of March 2014?
I'm going to say yes then, sir.
Thank you. So by the time you were instructed in August 2014 to carry out your FRA of Grenfell, which you did in October 2014, you had been aware for some months of the contents of the deficiency notice which had been served in March 2014.
So,
Thank you. Now, you go on to say in paragraph 107 this, and I quote, second line onwards. As usual, I sought various information in advance of inspecting the tower, and on the 12th of September 2014, open bracket 0853, close brackets, I received an email from Miss Ray saying that Claire has asked Rydens to investigate the current state of the ventilation extraction system with J.S. Wright, and inviting me to a meeting to discuss this. Now, can we turn to that email, which can be found at CST quadruple 03178/1. Now, it says at the very top of that chain, Claire has asked Rydens to investigate the current state of the ventilation and extraction system at Grenfell, and Claire has set up a meeting to discuss and see whether it is necessary to instigate any interim measures in advance of the system being replaced. And she asks you to attend. Now, you're the addressee there, although it's redacted. Now, the subsequent meeting was held on the 16th of September 2014. First of all, do you remember attending that meeting?
Not specifically, no.
Can you remember a meeting at which Simon Lawrence attended to discuss the AOV?
So I'm trying to think who Simon Lawrence is.
From Ryden.
I can't, not specific, no.
Now, in his witness statement, and the reference is, we don't need to go to it, but is RYD 0009220/14, paragraph 68, he says that the meeting was held on the 16th of September 2014 with you, him, Claire Williams, and possibly Janice Ray to discuss the fact that the AOV was not working. Does that ring any bells now?
No, it doesn't, sir.
Do you recall any meeting where interim measures to be applied to the AOV were discussed with anyone from Ryden?
No.
You don't remember any discussion at all on that subject?
No, I don't, sir.
Now, let's see if we can help you. And that you wrote a letter to Janice Ray after that meeting on the 23rd of September 2014, so that's a week later, and that can be found at CST 00030043. Now, as you'll see from the bottom centre, it is a 10-page letter. Now, the AOV is discussed at page 9, at questions 27 and 28, and if we could go to that, just amplify those. If I just invite you to refresh your memory of what you wrote there at 27 and 28.
Yep.
Now, having refreshed your memory, do you have any recollection now of the meeting on the 16th of September 2014?
No, I think this is me walking around the building. I can't remember a meeting, but this is me walking around the building.
Well, if you have no recollection of it, let's move on. And let's move on to the 2014 fire risk assessment itself. When you conducted the preparatory work for that FRA, would you or did you routinely look at the AOV maintenance contractor's records?
Yes.
And can I ask a document to be put up on the screen, TMO 00879-757, which is a report from RGE, who are the maintenance contractors, and it's dated the 11th of October 2013, and it's handwritten. There we go. So I'll just let you have a quick scan of the front page. Now, if we could turn to page 3, and you'll see midway down that page a sentence interrupted with 3 asterisks, which says, in case of an emergency, we cannot guarantee these vents working correctly, asterisks, poor system needs attention, asterisks. Do you recall reading that advice and warning in RGE's report as you carried out the work for your 2014 FRA?
I can't remember seeing this particular document. No, I had seen one, and I quote one in the FRA, but the one I quote had a relay damaged. I can't remember seeing this one.
But the message there is blunt, stark and clear, would you agree?
Agreed. If I'd just seen it or was given this one, yes.
Now, can we turn to an email conversation into which you were copied, which was initiated by Alex Bosman on the 9th of October 2014? So that's 8 days before you completed your FRA. And that can be found at CST *01628/1. And if I could look at the bottom of page 1, you see there the email from Mr. Bosman, 9th of October, sent at 11:57, addressed to Hi Janice, Claire and Carl. Please see email below. For reference, I've attached the fire alarm service cert from 26/6/2014, which is valid. I'll forward all certs ASAP. Thanks, Alex. And if we go to page 2, you'll see there a further email, 9th of October, 11:53, again sent by Alex Bosman. And the opening salutation is, Hi, Carl, Matthew, and Greg. Now, in fairness, I should say it's not clear whether you're the Carl who is Carl Sperry, but the redacted block clearly shows, you can take it from me, that you were copied in to this email. And the email says this material, and I quote, I have an LFB inspection of the blocks above, which includes Grenfell, and urgently need to have the attached assets serviced rectified. Moving on, smoke extract, you'll see roughly halfway down the email. I understand a visit was carried out on 6th of October 2014. This system has been confirmed as beyond repair and is scheduled for replacement shortly. No further action required. And then if we go to the top of page 2, the very top, if we can. Maybe it's, apologies, page 3. Apologies, I can't come on to the particular extract I'm looking for, but bearing in mind what advice had been given by Alex Bosman there about the system being confirmed as beyond repair, can we now turn to your FRA of the 17th of October 2014, which is at CST *03157/26. And this is section 19. And if we go just below halfway on this page, you'll see a sentence which starts, there is an automatic opening smoke ventilation system. And it says this, located on each flat lift lobby area, there are 2 sets of vents, each of 2 vents on opposite walls on the flat lift lobby areas. There is a smoke detector located on each flat lift lobby area, which upon activation opens the vents on that floor level. 2 vents are for inflow air, the other 2 are extraction. The mechanical extraction units and the control panels for these vents are located in the roof level plant room on the wall. There is a manual override facility located in the ground floor lift lobby area for use by the fire service. Please see section 17 above. Means of giving a warning in case of a fire. For more information on the lift lobby area detectors. And then it goes on to say this, as part of the building's refurbishment, this smoke extraction system is being upgraded. This currently installed system was serviced by RG Services on the 11th of October 2013. This smoke extraction system incorporates dampers within the ductwork. Now, why didn't you include in that section the information which had been set out in Alex Bosman's email about the system not working?
Because it says there it's being refurbished as part of the upgrade.
But wasn't it necessary and relevant to include the most up-to-date information that as at the date of your FRA, the advice from Alex Bosman was that the system wasn't working?
The system is being upgraded. The fire brigade have the same information as I have. I was CC'd in, it was copied to them. They are the enforcement authority, and I now know that the system here is being upgraded as part of the refurbishment.
Can we look at this slightly differently? Isn't the fact that the AOV was, quotes, beyond repair, close quotes, a relevant factor when you came to determine the risk rating for the tower?
A consideration.
What's the difference between a relevant factor and a consideration?
Well, it's a stay-put policy, so the people would only evacuate if the fire was in their flat.
Let's look at this slightly differently. Would you agree that a non-functioning AOV would have heightened the risks facing residents if a fire broke out in the tower?
It would heighten the risk slightly, but because there is a stay-put policy, it is only the smoke control system is to make certain that the lift lobby areas are clear of smoke.
Even if it had elevated the risk slightly, that is a relevant factor that ought to have been made explicitly in your FRA, shouldn't it?
But it is covered there by saying that the smoke extraction system is being upgraded.
At the risk of being unduly loyally, Mr. Stokes, the prospect of the system being upgraded is wholly different to the system not working properly, or indeed being beyond repair, isn't it?
It is.
And that should have been set out in your FRA, shouldn't it?
Again, it's a stay-put policy, so the only thing that is, as long as the as long as the vents are shut on that floor level, the system would not allow smoke to permeate elsewhere in the building. It's a stay-put policy, therefore any fire smoke should not get out to the lift lobby areas, because the fire door of the flat should hold it shut.
Let's look at this again slightly differently. Would you agree that by not recording the fact that the AOV wasn't working, you gave rise to the incorrect assumption that the AOV would work in the event of a fire?
But the AOV was working, it wasn't working at 100%.
Where do you say that in the FRA?
I don't.
No. And the information...
So the smoke control system, the AOVs, is automatic opening vents, is just an event that will open and shut on an activator.
But the information you've been provided with by Alex Bosman was that the system was beyond repair, wasn't it?
That's a terminology and wording, beyond repair. It's not working. If the system was not there per se on the lift lobby area, the system is still in the staircase is still working, because that's a natural ventilation system.
Let's move on to a separate topic, which is your description of the notification deficiencies issued by the LFB. Now, in October 2014, in your FRA and your subsequent FRAs, you include a summary of the notice of deficiencies that had been issued by Matthew Ramsey on the 24th of March 2014. And it's probably useful to look at page 8 of your October FRA, which can be found at CST *03157/8. There we go, and that just be slightly amplified. It says an audit under the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005 was undertaken in this building by Fire Safety Inspecting Officer Matthew Ramsey of the London Fire Brigade, with a notification of fire safety deficiencies being issued. This notification of fire safety deficiencies was issued by London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority, LFEPA, on the 24th of March 2014. The LFEPA reference is as set out. And you go on to say a copy of this deficiency notice is held by the TMO Health and Safety Team based at the Network Hub. There were 3 requirements on this notice. These are: 1, a system of monitoring should be implemented for the smoke ventilation system installed on the flat lift areas, and a maintenance schedule put in place so the system is kept in good working order. 2, a maintenance schedule should be put in place for the emergency lighting system installed in this building and the system kept in good working order. 3, training on fire issues should be given to staff who work in the ground floor level reception area of Grenfell Tower. And then the 3 deficiencies highlighted in the notification of fire safety deficiencies, as issued by the fire officer, are covered in this fire risk assessment and on significant finding sheets that accompany this FRA. Now, can you help us? Why did you set out that information in this FRA and the subsequent FRAs?
For overall continuity of the building, so anyone looking at this could see a history of the building and that there was a deficiency notice issued to it.
Now, can we turn to the notice of deficiencies itself, which can be found at LFB 000322101/1. There we go. Premises Grenfell Tower. And if we can turn to page 3, it sets out the deficiencies identified. There are 3 columns. The article of the order said to have been contravened. Second, area of concern. Thirdly, steps considered necessary to remedy the contravention. Now, my first question is this. You have not included in your FRA the information set out in the middle column, namely area of concern. Would you agree with that?
I think I have covered it, haven't I?
Well, let's put both documents side by side, Mr. Stokes. And if we could keep this page open, and if we could put up page 8 of your 2014 FRA, which is at CST *0003157/8. Now, the question was, would you agree that you haven't included the substance of the information set out in the area of concern column in your paraphrase of the content of the order set out in the FRA?
Because it says there are 3 requirements. So the requirements of the notice are the 3 items there, not the areas of, as you call it, the areas of concern, or the letter calls it the areas of concern.
And you haven't set out in your FRA the steps that the LFB considered necessary to remedy the contravention, have you?
No, but it says on my document that the copy of the notice can be found at the hub. Please go there if you want it.
Can you help us as to why you paraphrased the substance of the LFB's concerns rather than setting them out clearly and verbatim so everyone could know in precise terms what was concerning the LFB?
Because the requirements, the actions of the document are set out there. If they wanted a full copy of the notice is held at the hub as it says.
Now, bearing in mind the preceding history with the AOV, can we look at the summary of areas of concern in relation to Article 11.1? And it says there, and I quote, failure in the effective monitoring of preventive and protective measures. For example, a significant number, open brackets, approx 25%, close brackets, of automatically opening vents within the common parts of the premises were found not to be in working order. No suitable system of monitoring was in evidence to identify deficiencies with the smoke ventilation system. That substance is to be found nowhere in the summary of the notice of deficiencies in the FRA. Would you agree with that proposition?
As I said, I've put the requirements down, not that item. Looking at that, how would they know that 25% of the automatic opening vents were not in working order unless they tested the system at that time when they were on site?
Well, isn't the reality of the situation, Mr. Stokes, that the LFB has set out what it has set out in relation to the areas of concern? And my question was, do you accept that you have not quoted that in this section of the FRA?
I have only quoted the requirements, but I have put down that the full notice can be found at the hub rather than copy out verbatim the whole of the LFB's notice.
Would you accept that by not setting out the substance of the LFB's concerns in relation to the AOVs, you've given the impression of downplaying the gravity and seriousness of the problem?
No.
Now, if we can stay with your October 2014 FRA and put down the notice of deficiency for the moment, can we look...
10, 25. So this is... this is March 14.
Yeah.
Is the deficiency, and my FRA is October 14.
Yep.
6 months later. So this is with hindsight, because the work in the notice should have been completed within 4 weeks, I think you said earlier on, or 6 weeks.
Well, we'll come on to that later. But the questions are that in your FRA, can you identify for us where you were satisfied that the works had been carried out?
What time that?
Perhaps it will come clearer when we go on
Yes,
to
sir.
further questions in respect of your FRA. Now, if we can, as I asked, put down the notice of deficiencies and turn to page 29 in the FRA. There we go. Thank you. Now, you'll see this is section 23 dealing with testing and maintenance, Mr. Stokes. If we look at the fifth box down from the top, it asks, is there a monthly testing and annual servicing and maintenance of any automatic opening vents along with any associated equipment devices with records kept? You've ticked no, and there's no further detail provided in the commentary box below. And just so you can satisfy yourself of the latter part of what I've just said, that page could be de-amplified. Now, can we take it from that by the time of your assessment in October 2014, the issue highlighted by the LFB in March of that year, namely that there was no suitable system of monitoring to identify deficiencies, remained an unresolved problem 6 months later?
So the no could mean that there is no monthly testing or there's no annual testing on the section for the for the smoke control. Is there a date in there? So there's not a date here, but where it says no, that could mean there is no monthly testing being undertaken or no annual servicing.
Given that there is a virtue in clarity, Mr. Stokes, it lay upon you, didn't it, as the fire risk assessor, to make that clear, and yet there is no clarity in the commentary box below. Can you help us understand why you gave no detail or raised no further questions?
Without seeing, what does the question I would have would be what does the significant findings say on this issue?
Well, can we just look at this box, Mr. Stokes? That was the question that was asked.
Yes.
You've ticked no to the question regarding is there a monthly testing and annual servicing along with records kept. You accept that?
Yes.
Looking at the commentary box below, there's no further explanation or commentary on that answer, is there?
No.
And my question was a straightforward one, Mr. Stokes. Can we take it that the problem that had been identified 6 months earlier by the LFB, i.e. there were no records in broad terms, remained a problem at this stage?
But there were records were provided to me that it was being serviced. If there is a no tick there, there would be a comment in the significant findings sheet.
Now, just to follow up this point, can we just move on in time to your FRA of April 2016, which can be found at CST quadruple 03161/8. So this is 18 months plus after the event. And you'll see at the foot of the page, number 1. Again, you referred there to the deficiency notice of March 2014. You say a copy is available at the hub. You identify the requirements of the notice, and you say a system of monitoring should be implemented for the smoke ventilation system installed on the flat lift areas and a maintenance schedule put in place so the system is kept in good working order. And then you go on to say this, which seems to be new. As part of the construction work, a new automatic opening ventilation system has been installed in this building. Now, we can go to it if needs be, but you didn't update either sections 17 or 19 of this FRA with the information about the new AOV. Can you help us understand why you didn't update those relevant sections of the FRA?
Because probably at this time in the April, I wouldn't have that information.
That information being what?
The new system, because I don't think it had been commissioned as yet.
So you just knew of well, what it says here, as part of the construction work, a new automatic opening ventilation system has been installed.
Correct.
So are you saying that you knew the fact of the installation, but nothing more?
So it's been installed, but is it in working order yet? Commissioned.
And what information, when you completed the April 2016 FRA, what information had you sought about the operating procedures of the system itself?
I can't remember the exact dates, but I actually went to a testing of the system along with LFB crews undertaken by the installer, and I believe there was emails in the meantime and from building control that I was copied into, and London Fire Brigade, I think their fire engineering department were actually designing and helping to helping to design the new system.
Now, you've just said the system had been installed. There is nothing in this FRA that says whether the system was operational or not. That was relevant information, wasn't it, for the purposes of the FRA?
It's ongoing at the moment. This FRA is being undertaken just before all the systems are being handed over.
Sorry to interrupt you, but just cutting to the chase, Mr.
Yes.
Stokes. It was relevant and necessary to set out in this FRA whether the system was working or not.
So
Do you agree with that?
Agreed.
Why didn't you put it in then?
I would like to think it is in there somewhere. If I've put it is installed, in the significant findings or in one of the boxes, it would say the system is to be commissioned, and I would ask for items like that the whole system should be commissioned, commissioning certificates provided, operators' instructions, manuals to be provided, kept on site, how it works, etc., etc.
Well, let's deal with what you did do, and just in fairness to you, go to section 23 of the FRA, and this can be found at page 30 in this document. And if we go to the bottom of that page, you'll see there the box with which, the fifth box with which we're now familiar. Is there a monthly testing and annual servicing and maintenance of any automatic opening vents along with any associated equipment devices with records kept? Now you've ticked the not applicable box. And if we could turn over the page just for the sake of completeness. And, sorry, if we could de-amplify and actually look at the comments and observations box before moving on. And I'll just invite you to refresh your memory looking at what's set out there. Now, there's nothing in that commentary box which says that the system is operational or not, is there?
But by ticking not applicable, I'm ticking that it's not applicable. As I said, it's installed but not working.
That's not
Correct.
an answer to the question I asked.
Correct.
There's no reference there to...
No, there isn't.
No. Now, there's no reference there to the documents that you would have liked or you were expecting ought to be provided in due course once it was operational, is there?
Not in this one. I haven't seen the significant findings, so I can't answer that.
Did you know at this stage who was going to maintain the AOV system?
No, not definitively. It would be on a contract, maintenance contract, first year.
Had you been informed of the identity of the contractor at this stage?
Only that, as it was earlier on, JS Wright, or I knew there was a contractor in place.
Now, can we turn to the significant findings schedule, which is at CST quadruple 03098/8. And if we could look at item 23G, you see penultimate one from the bottom of the page. The identified risk is said to be, are the weekly occupiers' test of buildings' automatic smoke ventilation system being undertaken? In the actions to be taken column, it says this: weekly occupier inspection of the building's smoke ventilation system should be undertaken, with the results recorded as proof of the inspections having been undertaken. There is no reference there, is there, to whether the system's operational or not?
Yep.
There's no information there as to the types of records and documents you'd be expecting to see once it had become operational, is there?
These not covered, so this is just testing, is it not covered further up the page under section 17?
Well, let's have a look if you want to. Work be amplified. So we go 17 starts at the bottom. Nothing there, is there?
No.
Let's turn over the page.
So
And then you go 19B.
So,
Is that what you're wanting to identify?
so
Thank you. Now, can we turn to the design of the new system? And if I could ask you to put down that document and turn up the first statement of yours, which is at paragraph 111, which can be found at CST quadruple 03063. And there we go, thank you. And then just to sort of fix you in the statement, you refer to a letter you received on the, a letter dated the 10th of April 2015. And if we turn over the page, you say, I met with the ventilation consultant who is designing the new flat lift lobby area and staircase ventilation systems for the tower. Full details of these systems are to be provided, but according to the consultant, the systems have been agreed in principle with both the RBKC Building Control Department and the LFB Fire Engineering Team, close quotes. You then say in your statement, I also then suggested that written confirmation was sought from the consultant to confirm what he had told me verbally. Now, if we could just explore this element of what you say in your statement. First of all, who was the ventilation consultant?
I've got no name, sorry.
Can you remember whether they were from PSB or from another outfit?
I was just there as an observer. I wasn't even meant to be there because I was in working that day. I was just asked, do you want to go along, I think was the...
I understand that, but can you remember whether they were from PSB?
No, I can't remember.
Can you remember the gist of what you were told about the design of the system?
I was given afterwards some information, and it was a mechanical system to be, from the top of my head I can't remember, but I had information given to me on like a user's guide.
Were you actually given a physical copy of the user's guide to keep for your own records?
I'm going to say a guide, yes. I was given a copy.
You were?
I believe so, because that's where I would have got information from.
Was there any discussion of the extent to which the new system complied with relevant British standards or any other applicable guidance?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but if it's not in that guidance, my understanding was that obviously building control were overseeing it along with the LFB's engineering department.
Can you remember whether there was any discussion of the system being a depressurization system and the implications of it being a depressurization system?
That would not have sprung to mind. Depressurization, pressurization, yes, I would have understood, but depressurization?
No.
No.
Can you remember, looking at maybe slightly differently to jog your memory, was there any mention of the fact that the effect of a depressurised common lobby would have of drawing in smoke from the flat which was on fire?
That's why I was hesitant when you asked that question, because depressurization is a very, very complicated system to use, and the shafts in the building were existing and have been around for a long time, so to do something like that to a system would be far beyond what I would think would be undertaken.
I don't mean this rudely, but would the detail and the minutiae of how the system operated be outside the scope of your knowledge and expertise?
Yes. I would understand the basic principles, how it worked, but I wouldn't have any calculation or knowledge of it.
Would you have had a handle on the relevant sections of the relevant guidance? I'm thinking of British Standard 121016. No. Would you have been aware of, in broad terms, even if not the specifics of the guidance, that the depressurised system would provide no protection of any part of an escape route within the depressurised space itself, which may be entirely filled with smoke or may even be fully involved in the fire?
Well, that's why I was kind of like, when you said to me a depressurised system, because it's not something you would, well, I would have thought you would have put in, and they're not common.
Did you raise that reservation at the time when you were attending this discussion?
I never heard anything about a depressurised system.
Was there any discussion of the effect of the operation of the AOV on escape routes or indeed for firefighters?
My understanding was that the system was being designed as a site-specific system because of the way the shafts are already there and they were being extended.
Just turning back to your statement, looking back on the screen, you'll see the final sentence of paragraph 111 said, "I also then suggested that written confirmation was sought from the consultant to confirm what he told me verbally." Can you remember whether the TMO ever provided to you the written confirmation that you'd advised they should take?
No.
Can we take it from your previous answers that before you completed your FRA in June 2016, you did not know who was responsible for servicing and maintaining the AOV system?
Oh, correct. I wouldn't have known the name of a company.
Okay. Did you ask at any stage before, as you were carrying out the preparatory work for your June 2016 FRA?
I would know that when any system is guaranteed for the first year and you would sign a contract, that's a standard for any system.
Did you ask, for example, what their regime was for maintenance of records and where they'd be kept, etc.?
Maintenance of records would be at the hub. I would expect that to happen. I knew that the new room had been created on the ground floor for that system, along with secondary power supplies, etc., are all in that room.
Now, can I turn on to the next topic logically, which is the commissioning of the AOV system itself and its demonstration? Now, if we can stay in your statement, which is on the screen, but go to paragraph 134, which is at page 46. Now, you say there that you attended the commissioning of the new AOV at Grenfell. Can you remember when that took place now?
No, not an exact date. No, there's a date here, but I couldn't remember what that date was.
Okay. Can you remember what was demonstrated to you?
The system on the wall.
By that, do you mean the...
Sorry, there's two panels. So as you went into the lift lobby area through the main doors, it was open before you got to the lifts at the back. This panel was on the wall on the left next to a door that went through to, I believe, was going to be a meeting room, but there was a disabled toilet in there. It was on the wall there. And then there was a replica panel with all the backup systems in a room on the other side of that wall.
Okay. Now, was there any discussion that you can remember? Was the word depressurisation used?
That's something I would have picked up on, but no, it was not used.
You refer there to a service engineer being present. Can you remember his name or her name?
Male.
Male. Can you remember who else was there?
I'm going to say it was one of many undertaken, and I was with a fire crew, local fire crew.
Do you remember the identity of the crew manager?
No.
Can you remember whether there were any questions asked about compliance of the system with applicable British standards or any other guidance?
No.
Was that an assumption that it did, or at least on your part?
Well, it shouldn't have been installed if it didn't comply with some sort of standard.
Quite. You refer there to an email of the 5th of August 2016 from Janice Ray, and we can find that at CST quadruple 02905. And just let you. And it's entitled, we don't need to go through it, the header is the key for the question here. It says explanation of how the environmental system works. Now, as far as you can remember now, were you only provided with the details of how the environmental aspects of the system worked and not the smoke extraction element of that system?
I think I was provided with documentation, maybe not at this time, but subsequently documentation for both. I can remember asking for each lift lobby area had a manual override box. And I can remember asking how was this going to work, where were the keys kept, and how was the operating instructions.
Can you remember whether you were provided with the commissioning report?
I'm going to say that I got that at a very much later date after this FRA. There was certificates were provided to me.
Now, one of the points which you refer to in your statement is reliance on building control. And if we could go back to your second statement, which is at CST 000300186/36. It's paragraph 131. And if that could be amplified. At all times, however, I was reliant on building control's assessment of the AOV in terms of compliance with the functional requirements of the building regulations. I was aware that this would have been based on its officer's own expertise in conjunction with information and submissions made to it by the various construction professionals involved in the refurbishment of the tower. Did building control ever provide you with a final assessment of the AOV system or copies of their final certification?
Building control would only have, sorry, I start again. The assessments from building control, they would rely on from the contractor. I believe I got a commissioning certificate from the contractor, but nothing via building control. It all came from the TMO.
So it came in directly? From
the TMO. I had no direct contact with building control.
Can you remember receiving anything, was it simply the certificates and nothing more formal, any other formal documentation beyond that you were provided with?
I was, yes, correct, that's the documentation. Certificates, I never had any computer-generated data or anything.
Okay. Can I now turn to the question of weekly testing? And if we could go to CST...
Mr. Kinnear, do you mind if I just interrupt you for a moment? Because we've been running for nearly an hour. The plan, I think you may have been warned, Mr. Stokes, is that we should run through without a break until 1 o'clock. But if you'd like a break, now would be the time to have it.
I'm quite happy, sir.
You're happy?
Yes, sir.
Very good. And shorthand writer? Right. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. If we could go to CST quadruple 00199/11. And this is your letter to Janice Ray. Let me see, it's a 13-page letter. You see at the top there, item 23G, high, identified risk or hazard. Are the weekly occupiers tests of the building's automatic smoke ventilation system being taken? And they say action to be taken. Weekly occupier inspections of the building's smoke ventilation system should be undertaken, with the results recorded as proof of inspections having been undertaken. Now, do you know what testing had been taking place to this point?
No, sir.
Anything about frequency?
No.
Thank you. Now can we turn to a separate topic, which is the external facade. And could we go back for this purpose to your first statement at CST quadruple 03063/40. And hopefully it'll be paragraphs 114, 115. And starting under the heading, the external walls of the tower, paragraph 114 says this, and I quote, I've been asked about 1, my awareness of the facade design, 2, my awareness of the properties of the ACM panels and insulation used as part of the tower facade, and 3, my views on the compliance of the design with building regulations. Paragraph 115 says this, and I quote, I cannot remember when I first became aware that the tower was to be overclad. As already pointed out, the external walls of a building are not, in my view, part of the common parts covered by the FRAs, the external walls of a building not being covered by the FSO. Now, having regard to what you've said there, I now want to go through PAS 79 and then also the LGA guide, and then see, having reflected on what they say, whether your view changes as set out here. Now, first of all, can I look at PAS 79 and particularly the competence standard at Appendix D, which is entitled Behaviour of Fire in Buildings, and that can be found at CTA *00003/69. And I really want to look at the 4th paragraph on page 69. And it's the one which starts with the words accordingly. And it says this, and I quote, accordingly, the fire risk assessor should be able to generally determine how fires can start and how the spread of fire and products of combustion can impact on components of the building, identify failures and or changes to the building that could change the way a fire and products of combustion travel through the building, and scrolling down, to enable to fire risk assessor, spelling is correct, to carry out the above, the fire risk assessor should have, and going down, an awareness of how different construction materials behave in a fire, an awareness of how different structural designs of buildings behave in a fire, and going slightly further down, an awareness of how to identify that the subsequent use or alteration of the building can invalidate pre-existing fire safety precautions and or strategies. Now, my first question is, were you aware of the substance of that advice?
Yes.
Now, if we can look at Appendix H, which I think Mr. Millett took you to earlier in your examination, and that can be found in this same document, but at pages 73 through to 74. And if we look on the right-hand side, Appendix H, and it states under the heading Passive Fire Protection, this, and I quote, the fire risk assessor should have a knowledge and understanding of the role in the provision of fire safety. And if we could go over the page to page 74, and the left-hand side, if we scroll down, I'm afraid, a bit more, you see there in the very bottom left-hand corner, the heading in red, the building envelope, e.g. fire-resisting external walls, curtain walls. It says this, the significance of their role in protecting escape routes at boundaries. Were you aware of that principle as well?
Yes.
Now, if I could put that document down for the moment and turn back to your first statement, which is at CST *0003063/42, and paragraph 118. Now, you say in that last sentence, and I quote, I was also aware that the issue of external cladding is raised in paragraph 72 and 85 of the LGA guidance, although neither paragraph relates directly to FRAs. Now, for the sake of completeness, let's look at those relevant paragraphs of the LGA guide. And if we could go first of all to paragraph 72, which can be found at HOM 000-45964/111. And we see below the diagram, under the heading in green, I think it is, external fire spread, it says this at 72.1, and I quote, the external facades of blocks of flats should not provide potential for extensive fire spread. When assessing existing blocks of flats, particular attention should be given to any rain screen or other external cladding system that has been applied and to facades that have been replaced. 72.2, the use of combustible cladding materials and extensive cavities can present a risk, particularly in high-rise blocks. Restrictions are normally applied to the nature of such materials, and in particular their surface spread of flame characteristics. Cavity barriers are also required in some circumstances. Assistance from specialists may be required to determine if the external surfaces of walls are satisfactory and whether there is adequate provision of cavity barriers. And if now we could turn to paragraph 85, which is at page 129. And 85 says this under the heading controlling alterations so that they are not detrimental to fire safety. 85.1 says this, and I quote, alterations and improvements to blocks of flats can be detrimental to fire safety if careful thought is not given to the possible impact they might have. Problems can arise not only when large-scale refurbishment programs are carried out, but also during minor work that residents themselves might undertake. And 85.2 says this, processes should be in place for landlords and other responsible persons to scrutinise alterations and building work within common parts that could have an effect on fire safety in the block. It is important that building regulations approval is obtained where relevant. And if we go, just turn over the page to 130, and we can see various examples are given. And if we can look at the third one from the bottom of the box, it says this, and I quote, a landlord undertaking a project to fit rain screen cladding to an existing block of flats without considering the potential for a fire from a flat to travel upwards through the cavity behind the cladding to spread into the flats above. Now, having taken you through those various bits of PAS 79 and also the LGA guide, do you still maintain your essential view that the external facade does not fall within the scope of an FRA?
Yes, sir.
And is that for the reasons you gave in answer to questions posed by Mr. Millett?
Yes, sir.
Now, if we can go back to paragraph 72.2 of the LGA guide, so back to page 111, it says in the last 3 lines of that paragraph, assistance from specialists may be required. In respect of Grenfell, was it your view that assistance from specialists was required to advise the TMO?
Yes.
Did you communicate that view to anyone at the TMO?
Yes, in the significant finding sheets.
So I didn't catch that, Mr.
So in the significant finding sheets, I made a comment.
Now, can we turn to the 2014 FRA, following on from that answer? And if we can turn back to your first witness statement, which can be found at CST quadruple 03063/41, and paragraph 117, and I think this is what you were referring to. Is that right, Mr. Stokes? The reference to significant findings schedule and your recommendation.
Yes, sir.
So, is the essential position this, that although you considered the external facade to be outside the scope of your remit, nonetheless you chose, as evidenced here, to make recommendations in relation to it?
Yes, sir, because as you highlighted earlier on, I should take it into account.
At the time of the fire risk assessment that was carried out in 2014, did you ask anyone about the type of cladding that was being put on the building?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't think I knew, in 14, I don't think I knew that until I'd seen the example on the outside, I didn't even know it was being clad.
Were you aware that the mock-up that you were shown was what was proposed for the external walls? It wasn't the actual cladding system itself?
I wasn't shown anything, so I just happened to be walking by and looked up, and there was this on the wall. Well, it was on the wall above me. I think there was more than one style or type.
So you're aware that it wasn't the actual cladding system, can I take it from that answer?
Yes.
Did you ask prospectively about whether the cladding was class 0?
Only in as much as what it says there. I asked the questions as the consideration that I should undertake.
And your questions were limited to the substance that's set out there?
So,
Now, can I turn to the later FRAs, so turn to April 2016 FRAs. For the purposes of preparing that assessment, did you receive any further information about the cladding itself?
only in as much as I asked when I was on site, were they compliant from Rydens? And I was told there was a building controls letter of comfort being issued to say it was compliant.
And was your question, were these compliant? Is that the gist of the question you actually asked when you were on site for the purposes of carrying out the April 2016 FRA?
All the way through, they were the questions I asked. Is this compliant? Is it fixed compliant? And are building control happy with everything that's there?
So is your evidence that you, looking at the screen now, looking at the recommendations you made there, that you actively chased up answers to each of those questions?
Yes.
And of whom did you ask those questions? Was it Janice Ray?
No, I asked Rydens.
Why wouldn't you ask Janice Ray as being the person to whom you were immediately responsible at the TMO?
I think I probably did ask through, I am asking Janice Ray by putting this document to her and the TMO.
Okay, but this is 2014. I'm asking you questions about events 2 years later. Can you remember now in April or June 2016 whether you asked Janice Ray the direct question, whether she'd had satisfactory answers to each of those questions you posed in 2014?
Directly asking that question, no.
And so is the reality, therefore, that you were content with the informal information given to you by representatives of Ryden whilst you were carrying out your various visits for the preparation of the 2016 FRAs?
I was given assurances that building control had a letter of comfort, and therefore they were happy with the overcladding or the cladding that was being used, and it was fully compliant.
Did you ask, given what is recommended in the LGA guide, given what's recommended in PAS 79, did you ask Janice Ray to secure written confirmation of the information you'd received informally from Ryden during your tours on site?
Yes.
You did?
That would be part of the Regulation 38 information which was asked for in the significant findings.
Now, can we turn, staying in your statement, to paragraph 120, which is at page 42, so just over the page. And it's just following on from the answers you've just given. Mm-hmm. You say this at the start of that paragraph: when inspecting the tower in April 2016, I spoke to various people, including representatives from Ryden. However, I cannot now remember exactly who I spoke to on this occasion. I asked about how the cladding had eventually been fixed to the tower. Now, can you now remember who the various people were that you asked these questions of?
No, I asked the questions of the people that were showing me round at that time, or who were presented to me to answer questions I had.
Can you remember whether Simon Lawrence was showing you around? Can you remember what level of seniority of individual was showing you around the site?
Dave Hughes is a name that springs to mind.
And you can remind the panel, what was his role, insofar as you know, on site?
To be honest, I don't know his actual job title. He was tasked with showing me round, so he must have been someone senior or management of the site management.
Was he able to answer satisfactorily the questions you asked of him as you went round the site?
Yes.
Do during the course of those discussions with Mr. Hughes or whoever it was it during those discussions that you asked them questions about the cladding and the rest of it?
Yes.
And it's from those individuals that you obtained the information about a letter of comfort from building control?
And I also believe I was told that there was a letter of comfort from the TMO who told me that as well, I believe.
Now, you say in paragraph 120 that you asked questions of various people, including representatives from Ryden. Did you ask questions of anyone, for example, from the cladding contractors themselves about what was being put on the building?
No.
Why not?
I was never introduced to any of them, and if they were there, they would have been on the outside of the building, and I was internal.
At any stage, did you ask to speak to anyone from Harley?
No.
You give the impression in paragraph 120 that you spoke to various people who weren't involved in Ryden. Who else did you speak to who wasn't involved or didn't work for Ryden?
The TMO.
And is that it?
Well, I was speaking to people who were with Ryden on site. If I wouldn't know whether they were working for Ryden, I was with those people at that time.
And were these on-site conversations the only time you investigated or assessed the risk posed by the facade that was being, rather the cladding that was being put on the building?
Apart from asking in writing in the part of the risk assessment process for it to be confirmed that they're fully compliant with building control, yes.
So the information gathering process was confined to the conversations you had on site?
And with the TMO.
Now, staying with paragraph 120, you say this, as can be seen from my handwritten notes. Following discussions with representatives of Ryden, I recorded OK, FR, no timber, and quotes cladding external non-combustible metal fixing signed off by BC. Can you remember now, was it Dave Hughes who gave you that information, or was it someone else?
I can't remember actually who gave it, whoever I was talking to at the time.
Looking at the phrase OKFR, what did you understand that abbreviation to mean?
Fire rated.
Do you recall, during these discussions in April 2016, any detail being given as to the type of panels that were to be used?
No.
Were you given any information regarding the manufacturer?
No.
Did you ask for that information?
No.
Why?
Because it was overseen by building control.
Were you told about the type of insulation that would be used?
No.
Or the manufacturer?
No.
And you didn't ask about it for the self-same reason? You said building control were involved. Did you ask about the performance or certification of the external wall construction?
No.
And again, for the same reason you've just given?
It's being overseen by building control. It's a refurbishment.
Now, you referred in your previous answers to the FRAs themselves, and if we could turn to the FRAs, I'm using April 2016 as an example here. That can be found at CST *0 3161, and if we could look at page 4, on the top of that page, it says this, and I quote, "New external cladding has been fitted to this building as part of the project of refurbishment, construction work being undertaken on and within this building. The original external face of this building has been overclad. The new fire-rated cladding is fixed to the outface of the building by metal fixings, and the whole process has been overseen by the RBKC Building Control Department and officers. They have approved and accepted the fixing system and the cladding used." Now, did the term fire-rated, in your view, apply to the cladding, or to the fixings, or to both?
Both.
What did you understand the phrase fire-rated to mean?
Acceptable and approved.
By
Building control and compliant with the standard required, which I'm going to say is 135.
Now, when you wrote, this is the April 2016 FRA, remember, when you say in the final sentence of the paragraph we've just looked at, they have approved and accepted the fixing system and cladding used, it's right that you hadn't received any documentation from building control, isn't it?
Correct.
Because you received the letter of comfort on the 20th of June 2016, is that right?
If that's correct, yes.
Now, can we look...
But I knew about that letter, but I knew that that was coming.
As a result of the discussions you'd had on site?
Yes.
Now, can we look at that letter of comfort, which is at CST *03126? Now, I'll just invite you to, if that could be de-amplified, sorry. I'll just ask you to have a speed read of that. When you're finished, if you invite the document manager to turn over the page, as it were.
Yes, Seb, thank you.
Now, certainly looking at that letter afresh and with coming at it objectively, there doesn't appear to be anything in it that would give you any reassurance that building control had, quotes, accepted and approved, close quotes, the cladding system, was there?
There's no adverse comments, and the cladding would not have been on the building if it hadn't been approved by them.
There is nothing expressed there that could give solid ground for comfort that building control had approved and accepted this cladding system, was there?
There is only negatives on here, work that needs to be undertaken. Otherwise, it's all signed off as compliant.
Now, would you accept that you were sent a copy of the completion certificate in July 2016?
The full completion certificate, yes, if you said yes.
Yeah. So after you'd written and submitted the 20th of June 2016 FRA, you didn't ask for any other information or receive any other information concerning building control's approval of the system?
I've got a completion certificate. I wouldn't have expected to have anything else from building control.
Right. And that was it, and you were satisfied with that?
Yes.
So is the reality, therefore, that when you say that building control has approved and accepted the fixing system cladding used, that was based solely on the informal conversations you'd had on site?
No, it was based on these documents because there is...
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt, Mr. Stokes, these documents were sent after...
Sorry, yes, I knew that these documents, they were coming.
Okay. Given what PAS 79 advised, given what the relevant paragraphs of the LGA guide had advised, wouldn't it have been sensible and prudent, by including the information you had regarding the cladding system in the April and June 2016 FRAs?
But I didn't have any information at that time.
Well, that's the point.
But I wouldn't expect to have any information on those systems. And the fire safety order doesn't have the external facade of the building.
And so the consequence was that neither FRA could be said to have assessed the fire hazard posed by the cladding system, could it?
Because there's not parts in common.
But we've taken you through PAS 79.
Agreed. And I commented...
Hang on, if you just wait for the question, it's probably easier for you.
Sorry.
You've gone through, we've taken you through the various appendices which you accepted you were aware of. I've taken you through the relevant paragraphs of the LGA guide, all of which encourage, in broad terms, the risk assessor to have regard to the external facade of the building. Here, you have no substantive information about what is on the building when you completed your April and June 2016 FRAs. Wouldn't it have been prudent to have said that given the purpose of a fire risk assessment and given the substance of the advice set out in PAS 79 and the LGA guide?
It was covered in the statement that building control had overseen it. It was covered at the Regulation 38 information was required. Any subsequent FRAs of this building, once I had that information, could have been included in those FRAs. But at this time, this information hadn't been passed on.
Now, following on from that, can I ask us to go back to PAS 79 and Appendix A, Mr. Stokes? And that can be found at CTA *0 003 /65, and really the first paragraph on that page. And it says in the second sentence, and I quote, "The competent fire risk assessor must be able to make a subjective judgment, albeit based largely on objective evidence, of the overall risk to life from fire in the building for which a fire risk assessment is carried out." Close quotes. What objective evidence did you have about the cladding panels when you wrote the April and June 2016 FRAs?
I was assured by building control that the cladding was compliant because they were issuing a building regulations completion certificate. If it hadn't been compliant, they should never have issued the certificate.
Now, let's take that one stage. You said you were assured by building control.
Assured by the TMO and Rydens that building control was signing those off.
And so the information you received from Rydens was via informal conversations on site. That's right, isn't it?
Correct.
And the information you'd received was via conversations with the TMO. That's right, isn't it?
Correct.
You had nothing from the building control itself.
I was relying on they knowing that building control was signing it off.
So in answer to the question, you had no information directly from building control, did you?
No information direct from building control, nor would I ever expect to, because I would only have had it from the TMO.
So would you accept, therefore, that you had no objective evidence from building control that they'd approved, effectively signed off, the external cladding system?
I had, because if it had not been compliant, building control wouldn't have signed a completion certificate or had told the TMO they were going to sign off a compliance.
I'm sorry to be difficult about this, Mr.
Sorry.
Stokes, but the letter of comfort from building control, the completion certificate, came after the June 2016 FRA.
Agreed.
Right. So would you accept this, that you had, for the purposes of the April and June 2016 FRAs, you had no objective evidence upon which to rely that building control had approved and signed off the external cladding system? Would you accept that?
I had nothing in writing from building control, correct.
You had nothing from building control, did you? All you had was informal assurances from Ryden and TMO.
Correct.
So, Mr. Kinnear, is the burden of the point you're really putting to Mr. Stokes that he should not have made those statements in the letter? Because in the end, he was right, and the building control had signed off the cladding, or did sign off the cladding.
Well, the burden of the point is that looking at what is set out in Appendix A and the emphasis placed on the burden on the competent fire risk assessor, that at the time when he made the express statement that building control had approved and accepted, he had no objective evidence upon which to rely. And I think that's what I've tried to put repeatedly to Mr. Stokes.
Yes, well, that's why I sought to clarify that your point is that he should not have made the statement.
Yes.
Not that he should have done something different.
That's right.
Apart from not make the statement.
Yes.
All right. Do you want to comment on that, Mr. Stokes?
But I was
You understand the point that's
yes,
being put. At the
because
time
I
when you
didn't-
wrote that, you didn't have anything from building control. That's the point.
correct. But I was reliant on them and was told that it was coming, and therefore I've put it down as the risk assessor because I know that document's coming.
Well, I think the suggestion might be, though Mr. Kinnear will correct me if I'm wrong, that you'd have been wiser and maybe more accurate to say I expect it to be approved by building control.
So,
Yes.
Yes?
so, but then I would argue the point that if it was to be declined by building control, it should never have been on the building in the first place.
That's a fair point.
So can I turn to something linked to but different to the point we've been discussing? And that's an email you sent to yourself on the 3rd of May 2016, which can be found at CST quadruple 01449. And the email is entitled, quotes, Cladding Grenfell, close quotes. And it attached a photo of Grenfell Tower. And the photo, we don't need to go to it, but is at CST quadruple 01450. Can you remember now why you sent a photo of the cladding to yourself in May 2016?
Just so I had it as a reference.
Nothing more.
Yes.
Can I now turn to a separate topic, which is the 20th of June 2016 FRA? First of all, why were you asked to carry out an FRA in June when one had been carried out in April 2016?
One was just before handover and one was after handover, as far as I'm aware.
Can you remember whether you were given any particular instructions in relation to the 20th of June FRA?
I'm guessing
Don't guess.
Oh, sorry. One of the instructions would have been have any items from the April one now been signed off or have been completed.
Now, we've just been discussing when practical completion took place, and it had not yet taken place as at the 20th of June 2016. Wouldn't it have been more sensible to have awaited practical completion before carrying out the FRA?
I would, as instructed.
Did you raise, first of all, did you have that reservation at the time?
Nothing I thought about. I just undertook it as instructed.
So you didn't raise any concern with Janice Ray, say, listen, it might be better if we waited till practical completion before I carry this out?
Well, when I undertook the June one, still the lower floor levels still hadn't been completed. So the boxing club, the nursery was still under refurbishment.
We noted that the invoice you submitted for this FRA described it, I think I'm right in saying, as an FRA review. Would it be fair to describe the June FRA as a review of the April FRA?
They were all put down as reviews, sir, because they weren't initials. So on the pricing, it was only ever the first time you ever went to the building was the first one. Everything else was a review after that.
Thank you. Now, can I turn to a separate and distinct topic, which is advice on tall buildings, and in particular a letter sent on the 6th of April 2017 by the LFB. Now, just to give you some proper context here, on the 19th of April 2017, you received an email from Janice Ray, which forwarded a letter from the LFB, the 6th of April 2017 letter, entitled Tall Buildings External Fire Spread. Now, if we can look at that letter, which is RBK 000268888. And, sorry, I was rather hoping for the letter itself. There we go, thank you. And if we look at the third paragraph, could I invite you, rather than everyone having to listen to me, could I invite you to read from the third paragraph down until the paragraph which starts with the words and ends, starts with the words, I would therefore strongly urge you. So the 5 paragraphs from the third one. And if you could shout when you've done that.
To the bottom of the page.
It's to the fifth 5 paragraphs flowing from that one. It's the one and to the one, finish the one which starts, I would therefore strongly urge, so yes. I think you need to go over the page to page 2.
Thank you. Yes.
Now, if we can go back to the covering email that under which this letter was sent to you, that's CST *0 3123/1. And we look the second email down from the top. Janice Rowe forwarded that to you at 11:04 p.m. And if we look at the top, you responded to her the same night at 23:16. So some 12 minutes later. And you said this, and I quote, "Noted. That is why I asked Rydens for the information and compliance for the cladding and will dowsing of Grenfell. Rydens provided all the information and stated compliance with the requirements of the building regs," close quotes. Now, you responded 12 minutes later at 23:16 in the evening. Did you look at any documents or records before sending this response?
Could we just scroll down,
Of course.
please? Yep. No, I knew what they were talking about.
So if we go to the top of the page again in your email, the phrase in the first line, "will dowsing," presumably that
Window.
should mean windows.
Windows.
Now, to clarify, the information that you're referring to there in the opening sentence, is that the 1 or 2 conversations you had on site, plus such conversations you had with the TMO?
This is to do with this letter, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I know the building in Shepherd's Bush. There is no cladding on that building. It's a brick building. And I knew immediately that having seen the building, having seen the fire, it was to do with spandrels and a fire in one flat, then going up the building from where the windows had been infilled at the bottom with newer panels.
Okay, so to answer the question I asked, that is what I was asking you a question in relation to the email you sent at 23:16.
Yes.
Which said, that is why I asked Ryden for the information. The information referred to there, is that the information that was elicited via informal conversations on site and such conversations you had with the TMO?
And in relation to the letter that I was asked about there.
That doesn't say that, does it?
No,
So on fuller reflection, is that what you were referring to there?
both, yes.
Although you didn't refer to the LFB's letter or the facts of Shepherd.
So initially this, as you quite rightly say though, sir, that this is, I asked for the information and compliance of cladding and windows.
Were you sent all relevant information about any replacement window and facade schemes as the LFB advised or should be obtained?
No, because that's external facade.
Notwithstanding PAS 79, the LGA guide, that's the line you took for not seeking further information, notwithstanding the prompt.
Having read the letter that you were talking about, sir, the, I can't remember the title,
Tall buildings.
Tall buildings, that,
External fire spread.
so that letter, once I had read it, was to do with spandrel panels. The building at Shepherd Bush is a brick outer facade, and it was purely to do with infill panels in windows. And on the second page of that letter, because it's to do with the, so I can't remember the actual phrasing for the scheme where you don't have to go through building control. It actually says you must go through building control and it has to be signed off by building control.
Now, if we can go to a separate document, which is CST quadruple 03112/1, which is an email from Janice Ray on the 24th of April, so some 5 days later at 09:34 in the morning. And if it's at the foot of this page, Carl, my understanding is that we do not have any blocks with external cladding of this nature. Are you able to confirm, please? I need to write back to the Director of Housing, and I think you are probably best placed to advise me on the construction of our blocks. Please advise. And then over the page says, thanks, Janice. Now, your reply, thank you. Your reply immediately above the email sent at 12:20, so less than 3 hours later, says Grenfell, as far as I know, that is correct. Grenfell was clad, but the cladding complied with the requirements of the building regulations. Lots of questions asked of Rydens and answers received back from them. Now, had Janice Ray ever asked you before for advice regarding the cladding or the external facade?
No.
At this stage, did you, before replying to Janice Ray, go back to your records to ascertain the information you were giving to her was correct?
The letter doesn't ask for, it's not talking about cladding, it's talking about spandrel panels and infills in windows.
But the letter talks about tall buildings.
Yes.
It talks about external fire spread.
Yes.
Janice Ray had never previously asked for your advice. It was clearly a matter of concern.
Yes.
Given that background, my question was a simple one, Mr. Stokes. Did you go back and check your records before responding to Miss Ray's email?
I'd never had any information on the cladding at Grenfell anyway, so I had no records to check.
Did you think that you were best placed to advise her in relation to the issues raised by the LFB's letter of April 2017?
I'm thinking here that I am one of other people who were asked the same question. For my information, I was answering from my knowledge. This letter did not apply to Grenfell because it does not apply to cladding. This letter applied to spandrel panels and was site-specific to Shepherd's Bush. And on the second page it says about the requirements of building regulations, and the building control officer had signed off Grenfell Tower anyway.
I'm sorry to interrupt. My question, again, was a simple one, Mr. Stokes. Did you think that you were best placed to advise Miss Ray in relation to the matters raised by the LFB in their letter, given your particular expertise and background?
I did not even think of that answering that the answer to that question. I answered the question I was asked by Miss Ray, whether I was the best person or not, or if she asked anyone else, you'd have to ask her. I just answered the question I was posed.
Now, you said earlier in evidence that I think you assumed that she'd be asking other people this question. Just looking at this email, she's only asking you at this stage, isn't she?
She could have asked other people. I mean, I'm only answering the question I'm being asked here in front of me.
Why did you assume she could have been asking other people? On what basis?
Because I would ask other people. I would have asked anyone else who was around her at the time.
Wouldn't it have been prudent to have directed Miss Ray towards Ryden or Harley Facades or the asset management team to give her more informed advice on the risks of external fire spread presented by the cladding system that had been put on Grenfell?
That could be additional information, but it would be covered by the building regulations and Regulation 38 information that the TMO should have at this time.
Now, earlier in your evidence, I think in answer to a question Mr. Millett put to you last week, you accepted that a fire risk assessor must, quote, have an awareness of the limitations of the fire risk assessor's own experience and knowledge and, I quote, a willingness and ability to supplement existing experience and knowledge where necessary by obtaining external help and advice. Now that's from PAS 79, Clause 7 commentary. And indeed, you said that the assessment of cladding was a matter for specialists. Now, having regard to that acceptance, you say in paragraph 177 of your witness statement, and if we can go to this, it's the first one, which is at CST /000 3063/57. Now you say at 177, and it's in the middle of this paragraph, prior to the fire. So it's starting on the end of the fourth line. Your own knowledge of the existence and properties of the materials installed at the tower was limited, close quotes. Given that limited knowledge, why did you proceed to advise Miss Ray at all about whether the cladding on the tower was of the same nature as that covered by the LFB's letter of the 6th of April 2017?
Because the LFB's letter was about spandrels, not about cladding. Shepherd's Bush is not overclad with any other with no material. It's a brick building.
But I go back to the question I put to you earlier on, Mr. Stokes. It was clearly a source of concern to Miss Ray.
Correct.
She was seeking advice. Given all of that, given the fact you weren't a specialist, why didn't you simply direct her to ask the question of someone who was a specialist advisor in relation to the cladding?
But, sorry, I'm being stupid. But the letter refers to a brick building and it refers to infill panels, not cladding.
Would you accept that by advising Miss Ray in the manner you did in your email of the 24th of April, and it may well be useful to go back to that, CST /000 3112/1, you said, Grenfell was clad, but the cladding complied with the requirements of the building regulations. Lots of questions asked to Rydent and answers received back from them. In giving that advice, weren't you acting beyond your knowledge and expertise, and you ought not to have expressed yourself in such unqualified terms?
But the question I was asked, Carl, my understanding is, my understanding is that we do not have any blocks with external cladding of this nature. Shepherd's Bush didn't have external cladding on, so therefore the TMO, Grenfell Tower or any other TMO block didn't have any external cladding of the same nature as Shepherd's Bush.
Can I now turn to a separate topic, Mr. Stokes, and that's gas. If we go to CST /000 2731, and if we could start really at page 3 of this chain. And just see, you'll see at the bottom of the page there, this is an email from the Grenfell Tower Leaseholders Association sent by Tunde Awadero to Peter Madison about exposed gas lines running through the staircase. And if we go up the chain to page 1, and we'll hopefully see there an email you sent, there we go, at the top of the page on the 8th of March at 14:08. And you say to Janice Ray, second line, from the photos that you have sent, it appears that fire stopping around the pipes has been undertaken. Can you help us? What photos had you seen at this stage?
So this is dated the 8th of March 17.
Yes.
I'd gone to the building in the January.
And you think that's the basis on which you expressed the view there?
I understand they had been boxed in.
And were you satisfied that what you had seen was representative of all pipe work and that appropriate fire stopping had been comprehensively carried out.
So I've got no context of whether this is fire stopping into the staircase enclosure or fire stopping from the lift lobby areas into the flats.
So you can't help us now as to on what basis, beyond the photos,
So
you're satisfied in giving the advice you did there in the second line of the email on the 8th of March.
So it says, my letter dated the 30th of Jan 17 attached. Were there any answers given to the questions raised? So I went there to look at this pipe work and told them immediately that they should fire stop all the holes that the gas engineers had put into the building. I cannot remember going back, and the photos that you have sent, so without seeing those photographs that I've been sent, I can't comment.
Can you remember whether at the time you were satisfied that those photos indicated that the work had been carried out comprehensively?
Looking at this from the photos that I had been sent, I'm only commenting on that photo. That's why I've commented at the bottom. My letter dated the 30th of Jan. Are there any answers to the questions raised?
Okay, thank you. Right, can we now turn on to a separate topic? Sir, I'm mindful that we are 4 minutes to 1.
Yes. Is this next topic going to take a little while?
It'll probably take longer than 4 minutes. And so in the circumstances, might I invite you to rise until 5 to 2?
I think if it's only 4 minutes to 1, we might as well rise until 2 o'clock.
So be it.
But I'm assuming that you're not doing too badly given the loss of time earlier on.
We're not doing too badly at all. Mr. Stokes' evidence will be finished today.
Well, no, well, that's reassuring, Mr. Stokes. I think we'll stop now for some lunch then, please. Please remember what I said to you earlier about the importance of not talking about your evidence or anything relating to it to anyone over the break. All right?
Thank you,
So
sir.
we'll resume at 2 o'clock, please. And if you'd like to give the usher, that will be
Sir.
helpful. Thank you. Thank you. 2 o'clock then, please.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.